Good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On this show, we talk about deals and deal makers, ranging from like lemonade stands to special purpose acquisition companies, everything in between. And with that, there's a lot of conversations that need to be had about how to do things legally, right? Like the legal side of deals. So with that, I went to one of my buddies who's a deal making attorney, right? Like this guy knows about deals. Corey, welcome to the show.
Josh, thanks so much for having me on. I really look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. All right, so we're hanging out. I think you're in New York, right? Is that right?
So that's one of my homes, but I'm actually in my place in Marina del Rey in Southern California right now.
Okay, copy that. So I come visit you on the West Coast, and we're hanging out at a coffee shop, and someone walks up and they go, "Hey, man, who are you and what do you do?" How do you typically introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Corey Kupfer. I help businesses grow. We do that through deal-driven growth. I've been an advocate for entrepreneurs and businesses for many, many years. I was president of the New York chapter of Entrepreneurs Organization. I'm an entrepreneur since I'm 15. So I'm not your typical attorney. I'm actually an entrepreneur who happens to run a law firm.
I got it. An entrepreneur since the age of 15. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I was mowing lawns and shoveling snow before that. But at age 15, I actually had a business where I had I won't call them employees because I was not withholding taxes. So let's call them independent contractors. Okay. So I worked for a company so I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and in Brooklyn, all the houses are close together. And one of the things they used to do back in the pre-digital age, I don't know if they do it anymore, is deliver flyers door to door, like advertising circulars for supermarkets and stuff like that. And you would literally go house to house and put them in the screen doors. And I worked for somebody doing that, but I decided, hey, this is a good business. So I would stop on stores that would be on the route, and I would go in as a 15-year-old kid and say, hey, we deliver flyers. If you need any flyers delivered, let me know. And I got my own accounts, and I hired my friends. And the business model for the flyer delivery business was that they had an older kid who would drive and drop off the younger kids who would go, put them in the doors. You get a penny a piece for them. And the older kid would be the supervisor and make sure you didn't throw them in the garbage or down the sewer. Well, I didn't drive at that time, so I used to only take jobs that were within bicycling distance of my house, and I used to cycle around to check up on my employees or contractors. And I'm going to date myself here, but in 1976, 77, before I went away to college, when I was 15 and 16, I was making about $300 a week, which back then for a 15-year-old kid was a ridiculous amount of money. The only thing I didn't understand back then was when I left for college. I understood cash flow, but I didn't understand enterprise value. So really, in hindsight, I should have sold that business to some other kid when I went away to college, but I didn't understand that. So when I went away to college, I just stopped doing it. I didn't monetize it.
Yeah. You didn't have a succession plan back in the day, right?
Did not. As a 15-year-old kid, no, I wasn't. 16-year-old kid, I wasn't quite on that.
Were you wearing bell bottoms in 1977? Be honest.
Yeah, bell bottoms. I had my hair parted in the middle with the long hair over the ears, little horrible mustache, the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could see a picture of that. All right, so let's do this. Let's go back in time and have some fun for a minute, Corey. We're in 1977. You and I are riding bikes with bell bottoms, trying not to get it caught in the chain,
Yes.
and we're running these routes, and we want to scale. Instead of you moving off and going to school, we're back in 1977. It's you and me. You got a partner who wears a flat cap. I'm in New York with you, and we're going to scale this business.
Yeah.
What would we do? 1977, you, me, and some flyers.
Well, so two things. I mean, one, I was the only, sort of route supervisor at that time. So, there's a few different ways we could scale. We could scale organically by going out and getting, more business. And then maybe, you would be a route supervisor as well. And then maybe we'd be able to hire folks, and hire different people and just keep getting accounts organically. And, that's the way a lot of businesses grow. And in fact, now, as you know, because you've been a guest, on my DealQuest podcast, the main thing we talk about is, hey, folks, there's this other way to grow. And that's what you talk about as well, which is deal-driven growth. So what could have we done back then? Well, there were other companies that were, doing flyer delivery. We could have joint ventured with them. We could have in theory, acquire them, although I don't know at 15 years old, 16 years old, that we would have the capital or access to capital to do that. But in theory, we could have done it. We could have franchised, right? Sort of little circular league franchise, going on. That would have been a possibility. So those are a few of my initial thoughts.
Super cool. I like it. Right. Okay. So did you ever get into a situation, right? Everybody's running these routes and you're the supervisor. Did you guys ever walk down the road, like West Side Story style, where you see another flyer hanging company walking down the road looking at you and you're like, who's going to get to the door first kind of thing?
No, that didn't happen, but there were always some good stories. So, on a totally different topic, but if you just want a fun story, so one of the challenges, in the parts of Brooklyn where there were single or two-family homes, it was easy, but there were also parts of Brooklyn that had apartment buildings, right? And apartment buildings you had to get into. And of course, the superintendents hated when you put flyers in, because it was a mess. People would drop them on the floor and whatever. So we were, let's say, very creative. And these weren't doorman buildings, and these were buzz-in buildings. So you would have to get creative on, convincing somebody to buzz you in. You couldn't just say, hey, let me in, I'm delivering flyers. Nobody would do that. So, let's just say we might have done some things back then that were that are currently and have been for many years outside my ethics, but telling some stories about why we needed access to the buildings.
Right, and the statute of limitations has passed.
Way gone,
way past. Cool.
Nothing illegal, mind you. Just some stories about. We were visiting grandma, or we had to whatever, and I forgot my whatever. She's not. Who knows? Like this,
right. Give us a break. We're wearing bell bottoms. It's in the 70s. All right. So here, fast forward. Why did you choose to be an attorney?
Yes, it's interesting. So I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs, right? So even though I was I was naturally one. That was not the route that was encouraged in any way. And I sort of came up in growing up in Brooklyn in a lower middle class Jewish family with a very typical, stress on education. My parents were folks my dad got out of high school, went into the Army, got out of the Army, went to work, and he ended up getting a college degree over 12 or 14 years at night. By the time he got it, he didn't need it, but he wanted to be a college graduate. My mom stayed home with the kids, and then when my younger brother was in school, went back to nursing school. So, their whole focus was their kids were going to get an education, become a professional, whatever, right? So that was the focus. And I went, high school, college, law school, job. I didn't it wasn't even on the menu to backpack in Europe or become a ski bum for a year. And it wasn't even like I decided against it. It wasn't even there. So, so that was just the route. And I was interested in the law. I was in a special program in high school in Brooklyn. They had this special law, politics, and community affairs program where we got to do mock trials, and we visited jails, and we had mock presidential elections. So that sort of got me interested. And of course, that has nothing to do with what I do as a lawyer, but it sort of had me think I wanted, and I was one of these unusual kids that actually went into college knowing I wanted to be a lawyer. A lot of lawyers, a lot of kids that end up in law, are smart kids, do well in college, and they're like, all right, MBA or law school, what's next, right? So that's how I got there. But there was also always this entrepreneurial, itch from the beginning. And I started out at very big New York City law firm, kind of thing, which was plum jobs and, that everybody wanted. But I always sort of knew, and even in the early days, I had some friends that had tech startups and stuff like that. And on the side, I was involved in them and helping out. And, none of them really ended up, going anywhere significant, but I always had that, that need to be involved in something entrepreneurial. And then just less than 6 years out of school, I made the jump because I'm like, I can't work for somebody the rest of my life. And in fact, I can't work for somebody even for another day.
I've interviewed probably 1,000 people, and when I interview a true entrepreneur through and through, they're like, I'm the worst employee ever. I had to do this because there was no other option, right?
No, it's so true. I mean, the term that I have used for decades now is that I'm unemployable.
Yeah.
I'm unemployable. And the funny part is that it's not like, listen, I get that there are some entrepreneurs that are sort of total egomaniacs or whatever. It's not like I'm actually very collaborative. I work well in strategic alliance and partnerships. I have, I really work well with my team, and they can tell me that, you're crazy, Corey, you're off the wall. But it's owning the vision. It's controlling the way you service clients. It's setting the direction. And I remember when I was in, I knew I had to put in some years in a law firm just to, first of all, I came from no contacts, no money, no whatever, right? So I needed that, obviously getting training and, learning the business world. But I always knew I wasn't, meant to be there long term. And in fact, so I started in 1985, it was a boom economy, right? I had like 17 job offers. I could have had 30. It was like I was on top of the world. I was suddenly making money for the first time in my life. I didn't know what to do with it. By 1991 into 1992, when I set up my own firm, we were in a recession back then, right? The early 90s hit, real estate was getting crushed, really, and so I'm approaching 6 years out of school, and I had moved from a big firm to a medium-sized firm, purposely to have some more lifestyle and time to pursue some side interests and entrepreneurial things. And then the firm called in all the associates, because when the economy was going bad, all the big firms were laying off lawyers. There were a million lawyers they could hire. And suddenly this reduced hourly, billable commitment and whatever compared to the big firms. They wanted to up it now from 1,800 to 2,200 hours. And they want to, and all of the other associates, you had a few associates that were working that crazy anyway. And then you had some others who were like, well, what am I going to do? The economy stinks. I'm happy to have a job. I got to do what they got to do. And I'm sitting there. I had been planning on leaving in about a year. And one of the reasons why I was waiting was because I had some debt to pay off because I had student loans. And then, frankly, even though I was making good money in my 20s, I was spending more than I was making. Typical 20s, young kid in New York City kind of, experience, right? Yeah. So I said, all right, I'll go one more year. I'll get the debt paid off. It was about 40 grand in debt. But then when they came to us and said, you got to work all these extra hours and we want you to whatever, which would interfere with my stuff I had going on the side. And also I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do this for someone else. So, I basically told them that, listen, this wasn't the deal. The deal was that we actually got paid a little less than the big firms. We work less, and now you're changing the deal on me. And they were like, well, we don't care. So it pushed me out about a year early. And I remember I was at Bar Association, New York City Bar Association seminar, and there was a guy speaking there who wrote the book on how to start your own law firm. His name was Jay Foonberg. I'll never forget it. And for some reason, whatever, back then, Foonberg said you needed 40 grand in the bank to start your own law firm. That's how much capital you needed. I don't know how he came up with that number, but that was his number. I was 40 grand in debt. So my joke is what I always said, I was so close. I mean, it was just a vertical line. I was, it was supposed to be positive 40. I was negative 40. I was just missing one vertical line. That's all.
Times negative one, and it works out, right?
Yeah. So I went out. I applied for back then. They were less good about cross-checking on credit your application. So I applied for like 5 new credit cards on top of the couple that I had to have more lines of credit when I left, and I ended up I would have been making over 6 figures back in 1992 at the new at the old firm, which was a lot of money back then. A lot of money for people now, but certainly a lot of money back then. And I hung out a shingle, had no clients. I netted 17 grand my first year, 38 grand my second year, 36 grand my second year, 78 grand my third year. And by the fourth year, I was making more money than I would have at a firm and never looked back. But, I was paying my rent on credit cards. I was doing everything you weren't supposed to do. I was $115,000 in debt by the time things, started making money. And that's how I did it.
That's funny because funded by Visa. I think I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that if they were honest, they'd be like, yeah, I made a lot of really risky, tough choices to go out on my own. Looking back, would you change anything?
No. So, first of all, and I guess a lot of people says, but I am one of these guys that I certainly never look back and regret, it's all what got me here. I've certainly learned some lessons, like I'm smarter. So I would have applied, some of that stuff back then, but everything I did, listen, I just hustled like crazy. I was at every networking event that existed. One of my long-term good clients came from some networking event. I went to Connecticut, and met this guy. In fact, 2 of them at that same event. So, yeah, no, I think it's, I think it's what has made me the way I am. And frankly, listen, I've been successful, in fact, very successful at this point, but, there's been ups and downs in that journey, including certainly during the Great Recession when I got totally crushed. And I think that ability to create something from nothing in the beginning is a big part of what has us as entrepreneurs be able to deal with all the ups and downs and challenges going forward. Because, whether it was the Great Recession and having my revenue go down 30, 40, 50, 60 grand a month, like out of nowhere, and, suddenly being, at that point, it was $330,000 in debt. We had taken a lot of credit to build out a new office right before, the Great Recession hit. I mean, it was like everything. I had a house up in the country on a lake that was, not physically underwater, but financially underwater. But whether it was that or I've had like a partnership split up. There's a knowledge, not only intellectually, but also sort of in your body that, hey, listen, I created something from nothing. I can certainly come back from this because, I got more experience, I got more connections, I got more reputation, whatever. I mean, nobody knew who I was as a 30-year-old kid. I had no, barely any experience. I had no contacts. I had no capital, and I made it work. So, what's going to stop me from coming back from whatever the next challenge is?
Super cool, man. So besides not selling your route in 1977, I tried to do the numbers, 300 a week. That's 15K a year, right? Mm-hmm. Even with a 1 multiplier, like, hey, I mean, that could have been a good investment. We throw that into Apple. Anyways, so, yeah. Now you've been in law for a long time. Where would you say you focus? What's your specialization?
Yeah, but it's really is deals. So, the way I say it is we focus on helping companies grow, right? So some people say, who's your ideal client? Its size? Is it, bigger companies, smaller companies? I say, listen, size is not the determinant. It's really, if companies are smaller, medium, or bigger, if they're looking to grow. I mean, listen, do we have some bigger clients? If somebody refers me a huge client, they want us to do some basic stuff, sure, will we take it? Of course. But if they're not in growth mode, it's less fun for me, right? Because what we love to do is not only just document and execute deals, but we love to be strategic consulting and thought, partners with our clients to figure out ways to help them grow. And most often, because I'm not a sales trainer, right? There's one way to grow is, you improve your sales team and marketing, whatever. That's not what I do, right? But the other way to grow is to find deal opportunities and not only, and help the clients think through, okay, how can you get there? And for me, in my law practice, and it's also what I preach, like on the DealQuest podcast, is that there's a lot of misconceptions about deals, right? A lot of people think, oh, you need to, and you know this, you need to have capital to do deals. Well, not necessarily. You have to be a certain size to do deals. Well, not necessarily. Oh, deals are just big M&A or raising capital. No, there's strategic alliances and joint ventures and online licensing deals and online affiliate deals and sponsorship deals. And we can go on and on and on. Distribution deals, joint marketing deals, right? You can go on and on and on. And often when a entrepreneur comes to me and says, hey, Corey, we're trying to get into a new market or launch a new product or expand our, what we offer or geography, whatever it is, and we're having trouble, right? Their sales and marketing is not working. The simple first question I ask them, which often they've not thought about because they don't have, and there's not a criticism. They may be great entrepreneurs, but they don't have a mind. Like there's a mindset shift to become an entrepreneur. There's a mindset shift to become a deal maker, right? And the mindset shift to become a deal maker is different than the mindset shift to become an entrepreneur, because you may be a great salesperson or a great whatever, or a great but you don't have that deal maker mindset. So often the simple question of, hey, okay, you're banging your head against the wall to get into this new location or this new industry or this new product out. Who else has access to that market, that geography, that client, that industry, whatever, already that you can do some sort of deal with? And they haven't even thought about that, right? Yeah. And then don't worry about how it's structured. There's a million ways we can structure the deal. Just figure out who has access to that. What is it that you have to offer them, and what can they offer you, right? And then we'll figure out whether that's a joint venture or, or a strategic alliance or some sort of contractual arrangement or whatever. So getting that shift. So, any case, going a little off, but the point is that's what we love to do, right? Yeah. Now we have all the ancillary services. We do office leasing for clients. We do trademark work. We do basic contract stuff and employment agreements and sales agreements and operating agreements. But if you want to talk about what we love to do, it's to help businesses grow, mainly through deal-driven growth.
Yeah, I love that. Super cool. So you mentioned your podcast. Why don't you give a shout out to your podcast so our fellow listeners could go, hey, I love talking about deals, and I would love to hear a law guy who talks about deals too. So give a shout out to your podcast.
Yeah, so it's the DealQuest Podcast. Josh has been, or actually, I mean, I don't know which is going to air first, but if he's either been a guest or will be a guest, soon on, depending on whether my episode here is before his. So we are 180 something, approaching 190 episodes in, about 3.5 years in. Been very fortunate. Like listen notes, which measures overall reach of the podcast, not just the downloads, but has this top 1.5% out of 2.8 million podcasts worldwide, which is kind of crazy. I launched what I thought was to be a very niche podcast. I knew it wasn't going to be a generalist podcast. We'd never get 1 million downloads, but we've gone in the first year from having 60 or 80 people or 100 people listen to an episode to getting, around 30,000 listens a month now. So it's amazing. And the whole purpose is exactly what I talked about. We have on entrepreneurs who've done deals themselves. We have on like certain professionals like investment bankers and other folks that help people do deals. And the whole purpose really is to help entrepreneurs and executives and business leaders open up their mind to see all the different possibilities of types of deals that could be done, get the inside stories, hear the journeys, the good, the bad, the ugly, and just really start to shift and open up the possibility of what they can do in their businesses in terms of deal-driven growth.
Yeah. Deal maker mindset, right? You mentioned that. And I think I'd like to dig into that. This is a show called The Deal Scout. Yeah. I am a deal guy. I love deals. I love deals, right? There's a very different mindset from when I was an employee to become an entrepreneur. A very different mindset of deal making, a very different mindset of investor, right? Everybody has a different mindset. And to learn and grow, I think it's important to learn each mindset. As a deal maker, one of the things, instead of, hey, you're going to spend all this time, energy, and effort to crack a new industry, who's already there that you could partner with? You add value to them, they add value to you. You guys are in. It's a strategic alliance. Yes. What other ways or things do you look for as a deal? Because you're a pro. You've been doing this. You're a little bit older than me. You've been doing this for a while. What advice could you give us about the deal maker mindset?
Yeah, so there's a few things that is interesting because I actually just did a very succinct, less than 10 minutes solo cast on the DealQuest podcast on this topic, so people can check that out as well. So let's talk about it. So one thing is what I mentioned already, and what you're alluding to is just that shift to ask yourself the question. Okay, you have a business objective or business frustration that's going on, and the first shift is asking that question, like you said, who, right? Not like how, what do I have to do? It's like, who can I partner with? Who can I align with, right? That's the first step in my mind in changing the deal making mindset. The second one is to recognize that, especially with entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs consider themselves risk takers. And listen, let's face it, even with there's no question that's true, but there's a spectrum, right? There are people who really put it on the line, and there are people who are situational entrepreneurs who maybe had a client base they left with, and it was, the risk was hedged. And again, no judgment or criticism on that, but the decision to take risks in deals is a different risk decision, right? And just because you have taken the risk to start something from nothing and set up a company, which is amazing, doesn't mean, especially if you're not comfortable and not familiar with deals, right? You have folks that consider themselves deal makers, or they consider themselves entrepreneurs. They want to be deal makers, but they haven't really dealt with how to analyze or how to be willing to take the risk that deals take. Because listen, like anything else you do, there's going to be a risk in deals. Now you work to mitigate the risk structure, do due diligence and reduce risk. So that's another thing is to understand that there's a risk decision that is different than the risk decision you made to start your company. But frankly, you can draw upon everything that you use to take, like internally that you built up to take the risk of being an entrepreneur to do the same thing on the deal side. And then finally, there's it's just to hit the big categories. There's the whole conversation of resources, capacity, allocating time, right? Deals take all of that, right? It's like, if you spend all your time in sales and marketing in your business, or you're the operations person or whatever, you need to build team, you need to put systems in place, you need to allocate time for what's important, you need to have, project plans, all that kind of stuff. Well, deal making takes that as well. I mean, yeah, you may get lucky and find a one-off thing, but if you really want to grow through deals, you've got to figure out who's going to do it, how you're going to dedicate time to it, what the project plan around it is, and whatever. So making that commitment, and to do that, first, sure, you get into the logistics of it, but you got to start with the mindset shift to say, hey, this is important, this is a priority, we're going to put it in place, we're going to figure out the resources that we need to, and the time and everything else we need to get deals done.
It's so good because I think a lot of times, like, as entrepreneurs they're wearing so many freaking different hats. So the idea of a dedicated resource with a strategic plan in place that's measurable makes sense. So if you're just like, your job is deals, don't know what that looks like, go for it, right? Go talk to Corey, figure this crap out, and run with it. Now, let's do this. Let's play a game. Since 1977 to now, what's been your favorite deal you've ever worked on?
Wow.
And then worst deal ever.
And worst deal ever. Okay. Boy, there's so many to choose from. So, well, okay. So I'll share something that should about to be one of my favorite deals ever. All right. We're working on it. It's not closed. The reason I raise it now, it's very present for me, is that we've got I won't even mention the industry because it's not done yet. Right. But I have a client that I've had for 24 years. I helped them launch from day one. Right. I helped them leave where they were, become an entrepreneur, set up the company, do all that stuff. We've been doing stuff for them all along. And they are about to sell their company for, depending on whether they hit earnouts and whatever, somewhere between $60 and $90 million.
Yay.
Okay.
Awesome.
So, 60 is up front. That's going to be definite. And then they've got, they're likely to get at least 70, and then somewhere between 70 and 90 has some growth CAGRs on it. The reason why that is special to me is because, 24 years, right? Like, helped start, like, really, we talk about how we help businesses from startup to exit, but, many times we get involved somewhere in the journey, right? They've already started up, or they're whatever, or whatever, maybe they don't get to exit, right? So to have that kind of thing where really, truly, we're there at day one. And in fact, my client reminds me that I actually helped him carry his boxes out of his former employer. Now, that's a service I've never provided to any client since. It's not on the menu, but and then have him be able to have he and his partners have this phenomenal exit that's impending. That's very special to me. So that's out of. There's so many deals I could talk about that, that are great, but that one is very present to me because of the full circle nature of it.
Yeah, that's such a cool incubated love, right? Like you were there from conception. You even carried boxes, which is cool. Like, one day you and I are gonna carry boxes, and we're like, I swore I would never friggin' do this again. I would never. Don't say that, dude. As soon as you say that, it's gonna happen.
Right.
To now they're getting prepared for an exit. Super cool. I love seeing success stories. Now, here on the Deal Scout, we like talking about some failures too, and some learned lessons from getting kicked between the legs. Worst deal ever.
Wow. Okay. So let me think. I'm thinking about a couple. Okay. So we had one many years ago where I was representing a client who was a guy who sourced goods for companies, right? So this is back when actually the Soviet Union had just split up, the wall was falling, right? Whatever, and Russian companies were trying to do business internationally for the first time. But they did not have most of them did not have any capital. They were trying to do barter deals. They couldn't get But this particular company actually had some cash, and they did a deal with actually Purdue filled half a tanker with tons of chicken, okay, and my guy was sourcing the other goods for them. And so what were they sourcing? It's almost like too stereotypical to even be a good movie, right? Blue jeans, cigarettes, electronic equipment, right? Like everything back in the,
And
in the
white
90s,
t-shirts, right? Yeah.
right? That the Russians wanted, right? Like
Yeah.
the basic American stuff. Um, so two things happened well, and then we were doing another deal for that same client. So I'm going to combine two things in the Philippines, right? And two things happened on that. One where we got buy-in and it worked, and one where we didn't. So on the Russian side, there became a big tense negotiation because the Russians. So in those kind of deals, you normally have something called a non-circumvention clause, which says, "Hey, listen, I'm going to introduce you to all these distributors and manufacturers, whatever, that's going to produce these products, wherever, and you can't go direct around me and cut me out of the deal for me making those introductions, not only on this deal, but for a period of time thereafter." Very standard American clause. But the Russians, who were, again, this is like literally, months after the Soviet Union fell, they had been under Soviet rule where people were telling them what they couldn't do, and they weren't going to have anybody tell them who they can do business with or not.
Oh man.
And at first, my client and I thought maybe it's a negotiating tactic, but what I really realized was that it was real. Like this was like a real thing for them. Like they weren't going to be told what to do. So that deal actually almost died because of that. We actually saved that one, and then I'll tell you the one that really didn't work. It just, these stories come by because it's the same client. We saved that deal by actually conceding that point to them, but only after we had delayed a week to get all of our U.S. suppliers to sign non-circumvention agreements, which they didn't know, where they agreed not to do business with the Russians, which were actually more valuable because they were more enforceable against U.S. entities, right?
Right.
But so that was good. But the one where we had trouble was and it was because of legal and ethical reasons. He had another big opportunity in the Philippines to source a bunch of goods for a company, whatever. And I get into a room, and there's, we're the other side, and we're negotiating the deal. And there's somebody in the room, I don't know who they are. Like they don't get introduced, they don't say anything or whatever. And at some point during the deal, I find out that this is the minister, the government minister that regulates this particular area in the Philippines, who is not only in the room, okay, but is openly talking about the cut they're going to get to approve this deal in the Philippines. And I'm like, I pulled my client out of the room. I said, "You can't be involved in this." I said, "I can't be involved in this. As a lawyer, you can't be involved in this." He said, "Well, that's the way they do business there." And I said, "I get it. And we've run into this in many, but the problem in the U.S. is there's something called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, where it is a crime in the U.S. to, bribe, which is what it would be considered, a government official. So we ended up not doing that deal because of that. And here's the interesting part, and I don't, I think it's evolved a little bit, but not that much. There were other countries, like certainly back then, Germany was one of them, some of these countries that actually have rules against bribery and corrupt practices within their country, but they actually do not have rules
to be bribed,
right? Doing it in a foreign place, like bribing a foreign official. And their logic is, well, that's the way it's done there. It's not our problem. It's not within Germany or wherever it is, right? And not only do they allow it, but you can actually take a tax deduction for the expense, for the bribe.
Oh my gosh.
That was a deal that didn't work out. And then I could tell you a story. I certainly have had. It's the minority, but I certainly have had deals that have went through and then didn't. Then turned out to be bad as well.
Yeah. So I think super clever. Here's what I heard is, so in the U.S. we have rules that maybe other people do not follow, right? So having things tied up on U.S. soil, non-circumvents and certain rules where they're enforceable or where you understand the law, super smart as a deal maker. I tell you, and maybe I would love to get your advice on this. I have some deals like deal makers from like AE or wherever, SAE and all these places. I don't even know what they are. And they're asking to do deals. And to be honest, I don't know the rules or how they do things. I prefer to stay, do deals U.S. soil. There's a lot of deals here, but I'm probably missing out. What are your thoughts? How do you approach global deals, international deals? How do you approach it? Because I'm a baby in this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my biggest piece of advice to my clients that are looking to do international deals, and you're right, there's so much opportunity out there, but with that opportunity comes increased risk. You have all the risks of any kind of deal, and you have the risk of foreign regulation, not knowing. I almost uniformly advise my clients, do not do a deal in another jurisdiction without a trusted local partner, at least in the beginning, right? Now, listen, I have some clients, I had a client who was in the, used to be a shoe designer for Crocs and had his own company for a long time doing clothing design, that kind of stuff, and shoe design. And because of his experience with Crocs and other companies, he had so much, experience and connections in mainly in production in China. Yeah. That when he was doing that on his own, I'm like, okay, good, yeah, go for it, Joe, right? Because he knew that, he lived it for 15 years working for someone else. So he knew he had relationships there. He could trust people. He figured out who were the good ones and who weren't. But if you're new to the game, the problem is there's so much you don't know. And also in some of these countries, whatever the laws, the rules, rules are don't matter because the courts aren't going to enforce them or because it's going to take you 20 years to get there. So it makes it even, or local customs, even negotiating styles, very different. So, if you're going in new to do an international deal, it's like anything else. I'm not, don't be more careful. I'm saying don't do them. I mean, people do great, but I would try to find a trusted local partner, at least for the first, deal or two or three until you get to know the landscape and build your own direct relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. There's some sayings in deal making, right? So the deal makers, if you've been in deals long enough, you've probably got some skin knees and you've learned some things. When it comes to, if I'm sitting across from another deal maker,
yep,
I have certain sayings in my head to keep me in the guide rails, right? One of them is, I've heard this, right? Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Yeah. When it comes to the idea of a deal maker, we're doing big deals, right? Like we like working on big deals. If someone right off the bat is balking at my little sliver and theirs compared to mine, I see that as a yellow flag that person doesn't want to do more than one deal. Do you agree with that? And then what are some things that you look for as a red flag or yellow flag when you're sitting across the table from a deal maker?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. One of the things I say, and I've said it on my podcast, and I say it in I also, a book on negotiating, is, on that point is two things. First of all, many business deals create an ongoing business relationship, right? Any kind of joint venture, strategic alliance, partnership, you name it, right? Even acquisitions, sometimes, the sellers are staying on, maybe they're becoming equity partners, maybe they just be employees. But the point is that in business, there's such a high percentage of deals that actually have an ongoing, relationship. So if you've been a pig, right, on the other side, and, maybe you can do that because you happen to have negotiating leverage at that time, the other people, because of economy or something they did or whatever, are desperate or, or maybe personal stuff, they have a health issue, they're forced to sell, whatever it is, right? Then great. You won the negotiation up front. You squeezed out an extra concession or dollars or whatever it is, but you got an ongoing relationship. How incentivized, how good of a business deal partner are those folks going to be? You don't think they're going to be looking for ways to get back, right, what they lost in that negotiation? Is that really, it's just short-term thinking. It's stupid, because the best deals are deals where, yeah, I mean, sure. In negotiation, everybody gives a little, you don't get everything you want. That's the nature of a negotiation. But fundamentally, if people are fair, then you're going to get the best ongoing results out of them. And most deals, the upside opportunity, can way outweigh, the few bucks, that even, and when I say a few bucks, it could be a few $million, but still, depending on the size of the deal. So that's one point. The other thing I say is even on those deals where it's not an ongoing relationship, right? You're buying a company and everybody, and the founders are gone, or you're whatever. It's the deal world. No matter how big it is, the deal world's really a small world, and people get a reputation, right? Yeah. So even if and listen, you may get away with it for a deal or two or three or four, whatever. But at some point, word's going to get around, right? Amongst the legal community, amongst the investment banking community, amongst the consultants, amongst the accountants, amongst the industry folks in that particular industry. Trust me, people talk. And then, great. So now you've screwed people over on a few deals, but now nobody wants to do business with you anymore.
That is so true. And especially with the world of social media and email and crap like this. Like back in the day, you might have been able to get away with, hey, I'm gonna screw this kid and get his, flyer route, right?
Yep.
I'm just looking on LinkedIn right now. You have thousands of people following you. And together we have 199 mutual contacts. Now, I might not know all their names and birthdays and phone numbers, right? But it's a small world. If you wrote something and tagged me in it, it's going to be seen by 199 of my friends. So
That's
this
right.
world of like integrity and honest deal making, I think social media that's one thing I think social media has done well. There's a lot of things where I
100%
think
agree.
it's done terrible. That's one thing I love about it.
No, 100% agree. And listen, and here's the interesting part. We have that many connections despite the fact that you and I only directly connected a few months ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So think about that. Right. We're going to have more connections because now we know each other directly, but we had almost 200 connections even without that. And that's only first level connections.
Yeah.
Right. It's not that, flow effect that'll go out to second and third level connection.
Yeah. You see, you mentioned the word upside. Now, for me, I love the idea of upside. Upside to me is cool, right? You have to hedge your downsides, right? You have to be careful because you could get hurt, right? So if you did some due diligence and some risk mitigation and whatever on the downside, but if you have good upside potential, to me, that's the beginning of a deal. I love getting paid up front. I love making retainer money. I love that. That's cool. But the upside's exciting.
Yeah.
Right? What do you look for on something with upside? Are you looking at your max cap, or are you looking at like potential or limits? Like, what do you look for to make sure that it's worth your attention?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously there's a portion of it that's math, right? Any of those measures. But if I had to pick a single word that I'm looking for most on my own deals, or the deals that I do for folks, it's probably the word synergies, right? Because, listen, the best deals are, and again, I'm leaning towards the ones that have some sort of ongoing relationship, joint venture, strategic alliance, merger. The best deals are where 1 + 1, the classic 1 + 1 is not going to equal 2. It's going to equal 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever, right? And it's not just from, the part people look at is, the cost savings, you can eliminate duplications, get rid of some jobs, whatever, create some efficiencies. Frankly, in a good deal, that should be, that's there, but that should be the smallest part of it, right?
Yeah.
The best part of it is how the synergies come together for those two companies, right? Because that's the best reason to do a deal. Hey, we're doing a deal, not just to, save some expenses. We're doing a deal because there's cross-selling opportunities, because we expanded to additional geography, because we now can compete against some of the bigger competitors because we're now larger, because this particular company has a particular product or service or expertise or niche, right, that would really serve our client or our marketing, or they're better at X, they're better at online sales than we are, and we're great, at more consultative high-end sales. We can, whatever it is, right? It's those synergies that create that upside, right? That usually mean the most. And I think that it's interesting because your classic visionary entrepreneur may see the synergies but not realize some of the downside issues that can come up. And then some of your financial people and whatever often are too focused on just the math, right, and they sometimes miss that intangible opportunity. So I think a good balancing between, yes, not just being pie in the sky and having some numbers analysis, but also just not being tied only to the math really is what makes these deals successful.
We had to do that recently. I absolutely love that point. We were doing a deal recently and we were looking at our upfront retainer, and it was below our normal threshold. And some advisors were saying, hey, I don't think that's a good idea based on this. And then I said, but look at the 10 different deals I could put together because of this one deal. There's a
right,
multiplier effect that takes this retainer and makes it mute. And they're like, oh, I didn't think of this. And so like, I say that because there's some things that are more valuable than the today number.
Yes.
And the multiplier effect and leverage that could really turn a deal sweet. Let me ask you this. You're a fan of the arts. I see on your LinkedIn down towards the bottom, you're a very cultured man, right? Out of all music, movie, or books, what is your favorite about deals? It has to have something about a deal kind of wrapped up into it.
Wow. Okay. All right. This is question I've never thought of before. So let me think about it.
Yeah. It's a good one,
Wow.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. You know, it's interesting because I'll tell you, I think it'll be interesting to talk about this process going through my mind, because I'm ticking through movies that, you know, are supposedly about deals and other stuff, whatever. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You know, like, because so many of the, certainly in movies, so many of them show like the bad aspects of, of deals, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, the Jordan Belfort, like that's what the movies show, because I think that, you know, it's sort of the equivalent of a joke that one of the reasons lawyers are totally over-indexed against risk and they don't understand the upside of opportunity is because in law school, you don't read about the deals that work because they don't go to court. Right. The only things you read about are the ones that go bad, right? So like in a movie, it's more interesting to talk about the stuff that, you know, that doesn't do well. So yeah, wow, I've never been stumped for an answer before. I'm trying to think what I would say.
So let me throw some filler in here while you're thinking, because Wolf of Wall Street, the Jordan Belfort story. Yep. You have Glenn Garrigy, you have Boiler Room, you have Tommy Boy, right?
That's what I'm saying. All of these are like bad, you know.
There's a bad guy in it, or the bumbling idiot like Tommy Boy who makes a sale because he says, would you rather stick your head up his ass looking, you know, bull's ass looking at the meat, or take the butcher's word for it, right? Like Tommy Boy is our idol to look up to as a deal maker. He's great. Right. But I think movies only show, or maybe not only show, but typically show like the bad guys of deal makers, and it's villainized a little bit.
That's why I'm having trouble, you know? And I get it. Listen, I get it, because probably the good guys are not as interesting from a movie point of view, right? You know, from a deal point of view, I obviously want, but from a movie point of view, it just there's less drama and intrigue and whatever, you know. It's it's interesting. I mean, well, I'll tell you, I just thought of something. I'm trying to remember his name. The guy who wrote the Surrender Experiment, or is that what it's called, Surrender Experiment? Oh my God, it'll come. Maybe I can. Let me see if I'm thinking about the right guy, because this is a guy who.
Michael Singer.
Yeah, what's that?
Right. Michael Singer.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, because Michael Singer is a fascinating guy. All right, if people haven't read his books, he created one of the biggest, most successful companies while basically like buying a land that became like a spiritual retreat site and living like, you know, out in the woods or whatever, right? And so this is actually, you know, so it's a great entrepreneurial story, and he certainly did deals. He eventually actually sold the company, and it's really a lesson in how you actually succeed through surrender, which is such a weird concept for a lot of entrepreneurs, and like driving, goal setting, we got to do this. So actually, that's my answer. Is Michael Singer.
That is such a. I'm going to put that book on my list. That is such a great answer. Great answer, because it challenges me, because I am not a surrender kind of guy.
Exactly. Neither am I, naturally.
Awesome. So I'm going to take a look at that. Michael, if you're listening in, I want a signed copy of that book. I'll buy it, but I want a signed copy. I collect signed copies of books, which I need to get a copy of your book. You have a book.
I will say.
Called,
I do.
Let me take a look.
Authentic Negotiation.
Authentic Negotiation. 3 keys to negotiation. Don't tell us all of them. Give us one key to authentic negotiation, and then I want you to give a shout out to where people could buy it.
Sure. So my fundamental framework is CDE. So you're not going to find out what the D and E is, because Josh only wants one. So the C stands for clarity. So the difference in my book is that I actually I don't talk about tactic and counter tactics and whatever. There's all kinds of stuff written on that. A lot of it's manipulative and bad. Some of it's fine. But I talk about the internal body of work that you need to do to be a great negotiator, because I believe that everything is manifest from within, right? So the bottom line is, if we go into a negotiation and apply any of these tactics that some of the other places teach you, or you're in a place of fear or scarcity or desperation or whatever, that's going to come through. Okay. So we want to do that internal work, not to be in that energy. The first thing we do is get clarity. When I say clarity, it sounds simple, but almost nobody does it at the level I talk about. Sure, there's some external preparation, research, what's going on in the industry, what multiples are, what people are paying, blah, blah, blah. But then there's an internal body of work to get clear on exactly what are your objectives and what's acceptable and not acceptable on every single point in the deal. And I can't tell you how many, very multi-million, tens of millions of dollars deals we do where, people don't do that. I mean, listen, we're entrepreneurs, we're business owners, we're busy, right? We don't take the time. If you do that right, and so I have this thing that I call my true bottom line test, right? So I'll play a little game with you, Josh, here, if you don't mind.
I love games. Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So let's say you are selling your company, right? We're going to make it up. This is not real numbers. You don't have to, right? But let's make up a number. What would you like to sell your company for?
$10 million.
Great, $10 million. What's your bottom line? Is that your wish? But like push comes to shove, what's the minimum you would take? It's between you and I. I'm your attorney. Nobody else is going to hear this.
8.2.
8.2. Great. Okay. So now, in addition to getting at least at 8.2, you might have 3 or 5 or 20 other important terms of the deal, right? Yeah. When you get paid, what industry, whatever, whether your key employees get an employment contract, right? Whatever it is, right? So now I say to you, Josh, listen, I got good news for you. We've been negotiating with the other side. Okay. They have agreed to every single other important term of the deal that you wanted, except they can't do 8.2, but they will do $8,199,999.99. Do you take the deal?
No, principles. Hell no.
Yes, now, I will tell you, listen, obviously I set you up where you're going to say that, but most people honestly would. And most people say, yeah, why wouldn't I? It's just a penny, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll say, okay, what about a penny less than that, or a penny less than that, or a penny less than that, or a penny less than that? You can get to 0.
Right.
Right. So the level of clarity I'm talking about, it's easy to see with money, not a dollar more, not a penny less, not a penny more, is you really need to come to that point where you're clear, like this is the bottom line. And that's true on anything. How long is your employment or consulting agreement can be, right? Is it a year? Is it 6 months? Do they want to stay on for 3 years? What's acceptable? Not a day less, not a day more, right? That level of clarity on every single thing, not from a place of rigidity, because maybe you learn new things. Maybe they give you something else on this side and you do have a little more flexibility on this side. Yeah. But from that point of total clarity, because then it becomes very, very easy, whether you're emotional, whether you're tied up in the deal, whatever, it doesn't matter, because you can true it up back to that level of clarity you got, and you can say, hey, and then if we don't get to a deal, right? If we're negotiating with somebody, Josh, and we don't get the deal, it's not because they're jerks or they whatever, just because their objectives don't meet our objectives, and we can walk away from that deal, not from a place, because people always say you got to be able to walk away. The problem is a lot of people walk away from anger, upset, ego, whatever. That's the key thing. No, if you're going to walk away, you walk away from a place of clarity, right? Not from a place of emotion.
I love that. I'm going to buy a book, but I want it signed.
I will get you a signed book, my friend.
Yes.
You don't even need to buy it. I'll send it.
We have a deal. I love free books too. All right, so let's do this. Where can people go to connect with you and do a deal?
Great. So I'll give two. So my general website, which has like the book, the podcast, and can link you to the law firm, and just the general content I put out, is just my full name, CoreyKupfer.com. So CoreyKupfer.com. The law firm is kupferlaw.com, KUPFERLAW.com, but you can get to the law firm through the CoreyKupfer.com. You could also, link through to buy the book. It's on Amazon and all the usual places. There's an Audible version, etc. And there's also links on there for the DealQuest podcast.
Super awesome. Fellow deal makers, as you're listening in, the true bottom line test, having the clarity of the yay and the nay right in there, I think that's so valuable. And to be honest, I think that's a true test that we need to walk through. And, you're probably not going to think of it on your own. So if you're doing a deal of a decent proportion, you might want to have a conversation with a pro to help you walk you through some of those clarity points. So as always, reach out to our guests and say, I need help. I'm working on a deal, or I want to do a deal. Corey's contact information will be in the show notes below. So connect with him and say, hey, heard you on the Deal Scout. I want to do a deal together. Now, if you have a deal and you want to come on the show and talk about it, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, and maybe get you on the show next. Corey, are there any questions that I should have asked you that I completely screwed up and did not ask you?
Well, listen, I mean, as you know, I say this to my guests as well. We could probably go for hours and hours, in fact, days on all the aspects of deals. So that's all I question. But I will tell you, just one thing that comes to mind is, people have been asking me, the question that's been coming up a lot is, hey, in this market right now, like things were so strong for a while, and now, they're talking about interest rates and the stock market had it blip, or whatever. Now it's coming, whatever. Like, how is this affecting deals? Like, are deals drying up? Is money drying up? Is whatever? And I will tell you, in my experience, and listen, we're just a microcosm, but we've seen the deal market continue to go strong. We've seen the M&A market. We have so many M&A deals going on now. We've actually even seen valuations hold. I will tell you that there's a little bit of a shift that I've seen from putting a little more on the back end than in the front end. Down payments have gone up on a lot of deals from the old days where you had 25, 30% to 50, 60, 70, even 80%, up front. There's a little shift back to, lowering the down payments a little bit and putting a little more on the back end to protect against downside. But the money seems to be still flowing, and the deals are still getting done. And listen, the markets, come back, at least a decent chunk of the way. So, I'll just throw that out only because it's the question I seem to be getting most right now. Is how does sort of this mixed weird economy affect deals? So far, they remain strong.
Super awesome. Corey, thanks for coming on the show. You hang in. We're going to do a deal together. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening into the Deal Scout. Head on over to thedealscout.com. Fill out a quick form if you want to be on the show next. Till then, talk to you all in the next episode. See you guys.